This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
World keeps spinning around.
Hi, everyone. This is Annalee Kruger, the owner of Care Right Incorporated and Plan for Life Now. We work with families, Care Right works with families all across the country in developing an aging plan and helping our families make sure that they have everything in order. Their estate documents, if they want long-term care insurance. We align you with resources in your area to develop the aging plan. The aging plan is what is working well, what's working less well, what are the goals, what are the finances to accomplish those goals, and how is the family holding up? So if you have an aging loved one and you're starting to get concerned about their well-being or their safety at home, this is a good show for you to listen to. I'd like to introduce Attorney Harry Margolis. Welcome.
Thank you, Annalee. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited. I have met the coolest people all across the country just by networking online and contacts that I have that have just phenomenal people in their Rolodex or whatever they're called now, since we don't really use Rolodexes anymore.
In their contacts.
Contacts, there you go.
Right.
The young folks they'll be like, what's a Rolodex?
Right, absolutely.
How we used to function in the old days. I'd love to introduce you. So, Harry, you have been a practicing elder law and estate planning attorney for more than 30 years. You are a passionate advocate for seniors, individuals with special needs, and their families. And you answer questions in both your practice, Margolis and Bloom, LLP, and online at askharry.info.
Right. Yep. And at askharry.info, there's no charge. So just go on, look for your answer, and if you don't find it, post your question. I'll get back to you.
So that's open to just the general consumers and families to ask questions. It's like a question and answer board.
Yep.
Oh, cool. Okay, good. Yeah. Good. You are also... you wrote author of Get Your Ducks in a Row, The Baby Boomer's Guide to Estate Planning, and founder of Elder Law Answers.
Yep. Elder Law Answers is a website with a lot of elder law information on it, as well as a directory to about 500 elder law attorneys around the country. And then we also have Special Needs Answers, which is pretty much the same thing, but focused on special needs planning.
Excellent. Excellent. And there are thousands and thousands of families who need to understand what they should be getting in order if they do have a special needs child.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm actually in a group, the Online Advocate, that her focus, she does what I do except for special needs families. And so I'll also share this video on her Facebook group as well, because all of her people that are on that Facebook group are people that have special needs children.
Okay. And she's also national?
Yeah, she is. So she's got quite a following. Considering she just started her online advocacy Facebook group, she's got well over 2,000 people already in just like a short 3 years. So she works diligently because she also has a special needs son.
That's often the case.
Yep. So it's been a deep passion for hers for a long time. So, well, excellent. Well, thank you again for being a guest on the show. Again, we're going to be talking about kind of all things legal, what consumers should know about, so that if they're in this space of realizing that, I need to be getting my living will or my power of attorney documents, or I want to change those. So we're going to answer a lot of different questions today. So, what documents should everyone over the age of 18 have in place?
So everyone over the age of 18 should have really 3 documents in place, and they're pretty simple to get. You can even download them for free online at a lot of places. So the first and the most important document everybody should have is a durable power of attorney. And that appoints somebody else to make financial and legal decisions for you if you become incapacitated. And so that's number one. Number two is a healthcare directive, and different states have different terms for these. Some call them a healthcare proxy, others a durable power of attorney for healthcare, but it's really the same thing. And like a financial or legal power of attorney, it's also appointing an agent to make decisions for you if you become incapacitated. Now, healthcare directive gets a little confusing because it can also mean a living will or a medical directive, really guiding both your agent and your physician on what choices you would want. Some people combine those in the same document, so you have the medical directive and the appointment in the same document, or they might be separate documents. And there are even workbooks. If you really want to get into detail about what your wishes are, there are workbooks you can work through about what healthcare decisions you would want in different situations. But the most important thing is to appoint somebody to stand in for you and make decisions on your behalf. And then the third document is the HIPAA release. So while your healthcare agent, if you become incapacitated, can talk to doctors, can look at your medical files, can get all the information they need, you really should only appoint one agent on your healthcare directive. But you might have other people in the family you want to be able to talk to health personnel, or you might want to talk to them to be able to communicate while you're still competent. So typically the healthcare proxy only takes effect if you've been declared incapacitated. Mm-hmm. But what if you're temporarily incapacitated, or you want your spouse or your parent or your child to be able to talk to medical people for you, and you're still totally competent. You just want them some more communication. There you need the HIPAA release. And a HIPAA release, you can name as many people as you want to have access to your medical records and to authorize the medical personnel and facilities to talk to them. So those are really the three most important documents that I think everyone should have: a power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and a HIPAA release.
And I can share my experience with working with families across the country. 90% of them don't even know if their parents have any kind of estate documents in order, where they are, or if they are even named as the decision maker. So families are not talking about these things. They're not having the family meetings. They're not getting their ducks in a row.
Yeah, right.
And so what happens, like in my line of work with Care Right, with working with these families who are truly, they're in crisis when they call me, because no one ever calls me when things are going well. It's
right.
They've noticed something going on, or dad's in the hospital, or dad just had a stroke, and we don't know what we're supposed to do, right? So there's always some sort of crisis. And so 9 times out of 10, they don't even know where these documents are, if they're in place. They have no idea who the attorney is to even call and say, hey, dad had a stroke. Is there a HIPAA document? And even in this day and age, there's a lot of people that don't know what HIPAA is. And so these families, 25 years ago when I first started as a social worker, everybody lived down the street from each other. So it wasn't as awful to track the signatures. But in this day and age, if you have
and it's so much harder during the pandemic.
That's right. We got the pandemic. And then if your kids are all out of state and you're in Texas in a hospital and your kids are nowhere near you, trying to get information over the phone it's not going to happen unless you have these HIPAA documents and these documents in place.
Right.
So that's critical.
And you need your own copies so that so you can email them. What often happens, at least in our area, is if you go into the hospital, they're going to ask if you have a healthcare proxy, and if you say you don't or you don't know, they'll give you the form to fill out right then, which is good in some ways, but often you'll just name whoever happened to come with you at that time, which might not be the person you named when you were had time to think about it. Right. And so you can have dueling healthcare proxies, or the people can change. So it's really better to step back and plan ahead, or as you said, plan for life now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing is, in 25 years, I've never had a family ever come back to me and say, gosh, Annalee, I feel really confident about the decisions that we had to make as a family during the midst of a crisis.
Right.
You're not thinking clearly, you're totally on emotion, and you're most likely exhausted.
Yeah.
And your relationships can get pretty strained at that time too, depending on what the relationship was like before the medical crisis. So like if there's one takeaway in the first section of this podcast, it's have a family meeting, talk about the what ifs. What do I want? If you're my decision maker, what do I want? What is the extent of medical intervention that I want to have?
Yeah.
And make sure that those HIPAA documents are done and that the physician that your parent or you normally go to has that on file. Because when you get that crisis call and you have to catch a red eye from New York to get to Texas, you're not thinking, oh, I should grab that power of attorney form. You're just not thinking like that. You're like, holy smokes, I gotta get and come to the rescue and figure what's going on. So are there different forms for people in other age groups? You said, what documents should you have in place at 18 plus, 55 plus, and 65 plus?
So everything we've been talking about now so far, powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, HIPAA releases, are all about what happens to you while you're alive. And when you're 18, the odds are you're going to be healthy and strong and live for a long time. But when you get older, the odds change over time, and you have more responsibilities and you have more property, hopefully. So while you're 18, you probably don't need a will or a trust. When you get older, you probably do. And typically, people pay attention to this when they have kids, which is really actually appropriate because it's kind of a time in life when you have a spouse usually to have the child with, and you have a small infant that you're responsible for. And then you need to have a will for the most important thing is really name a guardian for the child. Mm-hmm. And that's the most, really at that age, that's the most important purpose of the will, just in case worse comes to worse. Now, the odds are really good that at least one of you and your spouse are going to survive until the kid's an adult, but it's just responsible to have a plan in place just in case worse comes to worse. So that's why a will comes into play, and then a trust as well, because if you have a child who's 12 years old and you're no longer there, you don't really want them to inherit all your money and directly, however much it is or however little it is. It should really be held in trust for them until they reach 25 or a certain age when they have capacity to manage those funds with some responsibility. And the more funds that you have, the more important this is. And those funds you may be living somewhat hand to mouth. Today, you're working, raising children, trying to build up a nest egg, but you also might have life insurance. You probably should have life insurance, and somebody needs to manage that as well. So I think once you have children, you need a will and a trust. And that might be it. I mean, people think about estate planning as that mansion an estate is a mansion on a hill with beautiful green lawns, and none of us has that. So why are we thinking about estate planning? But lawyers think of an estate as just whatever you happen to own. Whatever you happen to own, that's your estate. Mm-hmm. So that's the will. And the trust is a document that allows somebody named as trustee to manage property for somebody else. So, and they have to, they're kept to what's called a fiduciary duty. They have to, they're held to a very high standard to manage the property for that person or those people's benefit. And again, if it's just for your minor children, it's a relatively simple, straightforward document. Trust can, of course, get really complicated, but for this purpose, they don't have to be.
Sure. Then
when you get to be over 55, then hopefully your kids are graduated, unless you had them late like me, you've paid for college, or if they're going to college, or they've taken out the loans to pay for college. And you have to start thinking more about what's going to happen if you become incapacitated or if you pass away. And that's where I think you need to take a new look at everything. So you might have named your parents or your siblings as guardians for your children when they were 2 years old, but now that they're 22 or 32, it's no longer appropriate. So, so you may switch everything over to them to be your agent, your personal representative in your will, your trustee in your trust. And and then how the plan plays out depends a lot about what you're concerned about. Are you concerned about saving taxes? Are you concerned about a child who might be have a spending problem or a drug problem? Or do you have a child with special needs? Or do you have a vacation house in another state? All these might make the plan a little more complicated and a little more important that you really plan ahead. And then you had mentioned earlier, if you're planning for long-term care, one question is, are you just going to pay for whatever you need out of pocket? Do you have long-term care insurance, or do you want to qualify for Medicaid potentially to pay for your care? And if you may need Medicaid, then planning ahead can help perhaps preserve assets either for a spouse or for children without having it all spent down on your care first.
Mm-hmm. One thing I wanted to bring up is, because again, my clients are usually in crisis. They're older, it's almost always the adult son or the adult daughter who calls me because there's been some disaster that's happened and it's gotten their attention that now we have to actually do something. We can't just keep winging it. And so when I meet with families, especially when there's a loved one with dementia, like my mom has dementia, she's now in a memory care unit, but when she started showing signs of, significant memory impairment, one thing, if you're in that same situation where you have a loved one that has memory impairment, how do you recommend, because when I meet with families and I have them pull out all their documents, I'm like, okay, you look at your documents because you know who you trust and who you don't. And a lot of times when we're doing this aging plan, it's because of dementia. And it's important to make sure that those persons with dementia aren't listed as the decision maker. Right. And update those documents, because like if something happened to my dad and my mom was still listed as his decision maker, she's not able to make any kind of decision for herself, alone someone else. So that's another key takeaway is look at the documents that you have and make sure that the people that you named maybe 10, 15 years ago are still competent, that you still have a trusting relationship with them.
Right, exactly.
And that you're still on good terms with them. Because if you had a fallout with your agent 15 years ago and you never updated your documents, you might not want them making your healthcare or financial decisions. A lot of things can happen. And then, of course, today, the Harriet Ozzie and Harriet family of one marriage, 2 or 3 perfect children, everybody getting along, is probably more often not the case than the case. Correct. And if you're in that situation, great, things are probably a lot more simple. But if you've had a series of marriages, a series of relationships, if 2 partners have children from different prior relationships, things can get really complicated. And all the more reason you have to plan ahead and talk things through. I think a lot of people, seniors get married, remarried, and they don't talk through what's going to happen if they become incapacitated. Where's the money going to go? Who's going to live in the house? And everybody gets nervous. The new spouse gets nervous that they're going to get kicked out. The kids get nervous that all the money is going to go to the new spouse. And without communication, and with everybody being nervous, you probably more often than not leads to a bad situation. Correct. I can vouch for that. 85% of my clients, I need to do I'm doing mediation with them while I'm facilitating the family meeting because they don't know what they should be talking about and they don't always communicate very well. And sometimes because of blended families, sometimes this is really the first time the adult children of both sets are talking. Actually met, So So it can get very dicey very quickly. And my hope for everyone listening to this is now, like today is the time. Let's get everybody having a family meeting and say, look, this is what we have in order, so that no one has to get all bent out of shape.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about these things now while things are still going well, because having a family meeting during a crisis, I can tell you it's difficult for the family.
Yeah. Well, no one knows what the parents had in mind.
Right.
So it's very important that if there's a new relationship between two adults, that they talk about what they have, what their intentions are, and that they put it on paper.
Right.
And this is for a lot of reasons. Putting on paper helps a lot because, first of all, you have to come to agreement if you're going to put it on paper. You don't have. It's not that you're just going to have something in your head and the other partner is going to have something in his or her head without communicating it. You have to communicate it and talk about it. That's number one. Number two, the act of putting on paper makes more issues come up.
Right.
So more things to talk about as you write it down that you might not have thought about if you didn't write it down. And then it's an important aid to memory because we know that no one's memory is that great, and they all change. Right. And I might not remember what I was thinking 10 years ago until I see it, and so that's really important. And you can always change it later, if you come to agreement. And then I think the fourth reason it's really important is your kids don't know what you had in mind. And they have their own idea in mind, and if they see it on paper, they're more likely to respect it than if it's not there and they can try to kind of get what they think is theirs, even though that's not what you had in mind.
Right.
You might have wanted to go to your new spouse or your new partner.
And I think it's important, when I do aging plans with my clients, we talk about because I have the grab and go binder, right? I have the grab and go binder, which is the safekeeping for all documents, and then families scan it, all the content, their insurance, all the contents, the family scan it so they have it at their fingertips. But I encourage my families every year, let's pull this out and let's make sure that nothing has changed, because things with elderly people can change quickly.
Yeah.
Or say I'm the listed person as a decision maker for my brother and I have a car accident and I'm not competent. So then what?
Yeah, right.
And so I encourage my families, you have to look at them, but you also have to take it that next step further and have these family meetings so that when there is that crisis, you're not trying to say, oh, by the way, I have this and this and this, because you're only going to get like 2% of retention.
Right.
Whereas when you're talking about these things throughout the course of the year, people are going to remember it better. The other thing too is, let's just talk a second about what's the consequence of not having these documents in order and you're deemed incompetent from maybe a car accident or dementia progression. What happens with guardianship? And what's that picture look like?
So if you don't have any documents in order and somebody else has to step in for you, they don't have the legal right to do it in most cases without getting court approval. And different states have different terminology, but in most states, a guardian is akin to a healthcare agent. So a guardian is someone who can make healthcare and personal decisions for you, residential decisions, where you're going to live, things like that. And then a conservator is more akin to a durable power of attorney. So a conservator is someone who can make financial and legal decisions for you. The problem with this is that are few. First of all, it's cumbersome and expensive to get these appointments. It takes time. And that's all happening at the same time that you were in the car accident. And so your family's trying to take care of your health and answer your medical needs and dealing with the fact that the hospital wants to discharge you as soon as possible. And they're trying to figure out where you're going to go. At the same time, they're also hiring lawyers and going to court and getting all this other stuff done. So it's an added burden. And then there are some things you can do just once you're appointed, just on your own. But some things you have to go back to court to get approval for. So depending on the state, if you want to sell the house, you have to go back to court to get approval. If you want to make a gift to somebody because the person under guardianship or under conservatorship had been helping pay for a grandchild's college, we got to go to court to get permission to do that. If you want to place someone in a nursing home in some states, you have to go back to court to get approval for that. So this has additional time, burden, and cost to the whole process. So that's why one of the reasons it's better to have everything in place ahead of time, but it also can lead to conflict, or it can be the place where conflict gets played out, because since no one's been appointed and chosen as they would under estate planning documents, then it's up to the kids to fight out who's going to play this role, and often they are fighting it out.
Right.
So then you're really out of luck.
And I think you are out of luck. And here's a couple groups of people that, like for example, I'm working with a family that, well, it's a married couple. They both have dementia. They really aren't, they really aren't competent anymore, but they've never had children. They don't have any nieces or nephews. I mean, they're really out there on their own. You know, she wandered away from the home. Husband was too confused to notice, she's been gone for 3 days. I mean, it was truly just a mess and truly heartbreaking. So we're in that guardianship process right now. And because of COVID, it's even delayed longer. So we're looking at, a 60-day-ish, 90-day wait. And so we've had to put live-in care into the home, because obviously during COVID, no one wants to move into a memory care unit, knowing that, God only knows what's going to happen once you move into these communities if you can't get in to advocate for them. So right now, fortunately, they have the funds to be able to afford live-in care until COVID goes away. But again, it's a 60-day to 90-day window before any guardian can be appointed. This is in Florida. We have a shortage of guardians. In Florida, the guardians get paid $85 an hour. So, and it takes time. And if you end up being the guardian for a loved one, you have to keep good records. Any money that gets spent, any kind of decision usually has to go through the court process, and that takes time and money. So my point in saying, and it's down here, it's about $8,500 to $10,000 to do court appointed guardianships, because you have to pay for all of the legal fees and courthouse and all that kind of stuff. Up in the Milwaukee market where I started my business, it's anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 as well.
Same, probably same up in Massachusetts. And as you said, once you're appointed, even if you don't have to go back to court for any approvals, for any actions you want to take, you still have to report back to the court annually. Right. And if you're the conservator and you're reporting on the finances, those are very detailed accounts that you have to account for every dollar coming in and every dollar going out for the year.
So the moral to the story is get your documents in order while you still have capacity. Have a family meeting and say, look, these are what my wishes are. These are my accounts. These are the passwords. This is what I have automatically coming out of this bank account. This goes automatically on this credit card. Really educate your decision makers that you've appointed, because when that stroke happens, I can tell you it is a mess. These families, your kids, are just completely overwhelmed with how can we still get mom and dad's bills paid when dad's in the hospital? We don't even know where their accounts are, what the passwords are. And I mean, it is an absolute mess. That's why I built that Grab-A-Go binder. So the moral to the story is have the family meeting, get your ducks in a row, get your ducks in a row now while things are going well. And even if right now things aren't going well, at least you've got a lot of information just in this last few minutes of this section of the guardianship and conservatorship. Doesn't it make more sense to maybe spend, I don't know, how much would getting your estate documents in order cost?
It's a range, but say $2,000 to $5,000.
Correct. So that's much less than $8,000 to $10,000, which is what a guardianship costs.
Right, and you have a much better result.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And you're not doing it at the 11th hour, and it doesn't, and you don't have to do all this recording and stuff like you do when you go through the court. So,
right.
So get your ducks in a row now instead of going through guardianship court. Where should people keep their documents? Where should they store them?
Good question. So the one thing, one answer is not in the safe deposit box.
Correct.
So because that can be hard to get to. And the only document that you really need an original for is your will. And even a will, if you can't find the original, there's ways around that. Mm-hmm. So the storage of the originals is not as important as one would think, or maybe as it was in the past. So in a safe place, basically. So if you have a fireproof box of any sort in your house, that's a good place to keep it. Or even a file cabinet. We, as attorneys in our office, we do keep the original documents for our clients in a fireproof safe or in a fireproof file cabinet that's locked. And so some lawyers do that. Lawyers used to do that all the time. They saw this as their kind of retirement plan, that people would come back for probate administration if they had the will. It's not so much true anymore, I think, because people move around more, so it's less likely that people are going to come back, and lawyers are worried both about the liability for being responsible for retaining these documents, but also you end up with a lot of them. So right. we do that, and we've got file cabinet after file cabinet after file cabinet, and some of it, as you said, I've been in practice for more than 30 years. So some of these go back 30 years, and I've lost touch with these people, but it's not clear I can destroy those documents. So you're more on your own. So I would just do it in a safe place. A fireproof box would be great in your house. Just let the people who need to know where it is know. And also do PDFs. Mm-hmm. So again, for our clients, we scan everything. We provide both paper and copies and scanned copies of those documents. We have a loose leaf binder, like your grab and go binder, where we give all our clients a copy. So copies are in a lot of places. And as I said, and if they're PDFs, they can be emailed out to children, and they'll have copies, and they'll have a copy when they need it. So the copies are at least as important as the originals.
Yeah. One thing is too, because the grab and go binder has 11 tabs. So all your accounts, your passwords, it's not just for your legal documents. It's who's your medical team, who's your doctors, who's your home health care company that you're working with. I mean, it is all inclusive. And so what most of our clients do is they scan all of the paperwork so that they have copies remotely, because people don't live near each other. And some of them keep them in Google Docs, and some of them keep them, they have their own vault, like some of the financial planning firms. Mm-hmm. So check with your financial planner too, because some of them have an online vault that you can just easily upload all of this, and then you can grant which kids should have access to which. Right.
I know Fidelity has that.
Yeah. And so check with your financial planner too to see if they have an online vault system that you can upload, because then that's also secure. Because obviously there's accounts, passwords, there's sensitive information in there that you don't want just any Joe hacker to get a hold of and annihilate the rest of your life. So, so we talked about estate documents. We talked about what happens when these documents aren't in place. It gets very expensive very quickly when already things aren't going well. So let's not wait until there's a crisis to then have to pursue guardianship court. If there's a person listening to this and they named an agent maybe a few years ago or 2 weeks ago, and now they've had a falling out or they've changed their mind, how do they change that?
So you can always, nothing that we're talking about is permanent or irrevocable. So you can always revoke it and execute a new document and just send the person a note. or an email, just letting them know that you moved on, and so that they know. And the reason you need to let them know is if somebody has a power of attorney and they don't know that it's been revoked, they're free to use it, and they may be using it in total good faith. So it's important to give them notice that it's been revoked. But yeah, you can change anything. So sometimes clients get held up in doing their estate planning because they're looking for the perfect solution, and perfection is pretty hard to reach. So it's better to get something in place that you can change later if you rethought it for any reason, than to have nothing in place.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's also important to everybody knows someone who went to the doctor thinking they had a cold and they came out with stage 4 lung cancer, or in this day and age, COVID, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really important that when you get a new diagnosis that's pretty heavy like that, it's really important to review your documents. And I say this because I worked with families that, they didn't have a living will in order and they didn't have their do not resuscitate in order. They wanted to be a full code, a full resuscitate, because they were in their 50s at the time. They were young, vibrant, traveling, golfing, tennis, the whole nine yards. And so they're like, well, no, at that time, they wanted everything done. They had a good quality of life. Well, then lo and behold, his sister gets ALS, right? And that's fatal. That's fatal. And so after seeing, and she didn't have any of her documents in order either. And so she ended up with the feeding tubes and all of this stuff that had she had her documents in order, and if she would have known just how those medical things can really change your life, not always in a good way. I mean, she really struggled, Well,
it's hard. It's certainly difficult to anticipate. You don't know you're going to get ALS, and you don't know what it's all about ahead of time.
They ended up, my client ended up changing their documents and getting a living will, reevaluating, because she was also listed as their agent. Well, she's got her hands full with her own medical situation, right? So it's really important that, whether you or someone you know or love has a new diagnosis and you see their journey, maybe that's not the journey that you want to embark on, and make sure that the legal documents are updated. So they updated their own, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're so glad that we even had this conversation. And the thing too is that their kids had never talked about it with them either.
Right.
And so, you have to, when you get these documents in order, you have to communicate.
Yes.
And I've had spouses that they've been married forever, and they, we work together, and I'm asking them all of these questions, and they're like, you know what? We've never talked about this.
Right.
They don't even know if their spouse wants to be cremated or buried. People just don't talk about this stuff.
It's not part of their day to day.
It's not, and it's not like anybody wakes up and goes, yay, we're going to talk about end of life during coffee this morning. Right.
Right.
So what about travelers? So what do you recommend for people who are like snowbirders? I'm down here in Florida, whole place clears out after Easter. So what do you recommend for travelers?
So if you are a snowbird and you have residences in 2 states, for the most part, you're still just going to have one set of estate planning documents. But where you may want an extra might be the healthcare directive and the power of attorney, just because some states have their own forms, or the people who you're going to be presenting it to, whether it's a bank or a hospital, are used to particular ways of doing it. So you can double up. Just make sure that when you execute the second set of forms, it doesn't have the sort of standard language at the top saying, I hereby revoke all my prior durable powers of attorney, or I hereby revoke all my prior healthcare proxies. So that's the only issue.
And when I meet with people, or when I do speaking engagements, I encourage people because you never know. My parents came, so we'll just use my parents. So my parents are from Iowa because I'm from Iowa. They came down to spend the winter with me. A week after they got here, my mom's knee buckled and she fell. She ended up in the hospital for 2.5 weeks. And unfortunately now she's in a memory care unit because it completely progressed her dementia. 2 weeks after she fell, I'm literally admitting my mom into the rehab center for therapy from her fall. I look over and my dad is unresponsive. He was having a stroke, right? Oh,
no.
So these things happen all of the time, and you have to be prepared. Because believe me, when I woke up on December 3rd of last year, I did not wake up thinking, oh, my mom's leg is going to buckle and our whole family's life is going to change. Right. Dad didn't wake up on December 18th and think, oh, I'm going to have a stroke tonight at 6:30 p.m. But because I have their grab and go binder, I felt like I was in court, because they're obviously both in the hospital and stuff like that. And they're like, we need the living will. No problem. It's right here. We need their social security number. No problem. It's right here. We need a copy of their Medicare cards. No problem. I've got it right here. So there's value in having all of your stuff together, because I can tell you, as someone who does this for a living and then having it happen to my own family, when there's a medical crisis with one person, let alone two, it gets really real, really quick. Yeah. And because I do what I do for a living, my family is prepared, because shame on me if I did this for a living and then my family's left vulnerable. But I can tell you it's really overwhelming, even when you have all of your paperwork in order, because you're emotionally like, oh my gosh, what is this going to mean? Can Dad even talk anymore? Is he going to be able to walk? What's happening? They just came down for vacation, and all this stuff happens. And so my point is that we have to prepare for the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, because these medical crises are overwhelming, but it's worse when you don't have any of these when you don't have these documents in order. It's even worse. Yeah, so
definitely true.
The value is that, our family, because I do what I do for a living, our family has talked about the good and the bad and the ugly and the what ifs of aging for years. So when I called my siblings, I'm like, hey, Mom fell, this is what's going on. And then when I called them and said, hey, Dad's having a stroke right now, he's in the hospital, we were like, okay, activate the aging plan like pronto. And we had everything in order, and it worked out pretty slick as far as
that's pretty unusual.
But that's the value of it though, is your family has already had these conversations. It's not like you're calling them up at midnight and say, hey, guess what? Dad had a stroke. What should we do? We already knew, because Dad and Mom talked about it. And things changed, just even with we'll just use Mom and Dad, Mom has always been very clear to do not resuscitate. Right. Mm-hmm. And so with her dementia progression, we already had all of that in order. And so she's a do not resuscitate. My dad was always a do not resuscitate as well, but because he's still her caregiver, even though she's in a memory care unit, he's still a caregiver, but just in a different kind of way. But he's actually now, since he has time, he's got the energy and he's sleeping well. And so he's actually exercising, and he's in the best physical shape. He's in better shape. He's been in ever. He's in really good shape. He left the Army. And so he's like, you know what? I think I might want to be resuscitated. So my point is that people can change their mind, and you need to make sure that your new ideas or your new opinion gets documented, because otherwise, if we would never had that conversation, and that was just 2 weeks ago, and I point this way because his bedroom, he lives with me now. So his bedroom is right there. And so, but if we would have never had that conversation of, hey, you know what? I've changed my mind. I want to be resuscitated. Yeah. That's a whole different picture of a do not resuscitate. Right. One thing definitely. I encourage too, is carrying these documents with you. I don't know how you feel about that, but this has been my personal experience, because I work with families in crisis every single day. They're always caught off guard, and they're always blindsided by a car accident or that stroke, or, Mom wandered out of the house. She got hit by a car, because they didn't have a plan in place for her when her dementia progressed. So my own personal story is, and I'm a national speaker on aging issues, right, and crisis management and how to facilitate family meetings. So I speak nationally about all of these topics. I had just returned from Shenzhen and Beijing, China from a speaking engagement. Then I was in Chicago for a week on a speaking tour. Then I was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, which is this teeny tiny little town. And lo and behold, I was walking in the crosswalk. I had encountered a little elderly gentleman. He was 82 when I was walking up the street, and I said, "Hi, how are you?" And he gave me this whole list of his medical stuff, which is what you can expect when you ask someone how they are. And so we're talking as we're walking through the intersection in the crosswalk, and all of a sudden he yells, "Watch out." And a school bus driver was distracted by the kids on the bus. Instead of looking through the windshield, she was looking up in that little mirror. And so she didn't see me. She blew through the intersection, and didn't apply the brakes until she saw my face break the headlight of the school bus. So I fly 15 feet. And because I do what I do for a living, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I must have just got hit by a school bus. I'm like piecing this all together as I'm getting up and walking. I'm like, what the heck just happened here? And by then, because it was over rush hour, the noon hour, all these people came out of these stores, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you got up and you can walk.
Yeah,
and
you shouldn't get up.
Yeah. And so I'm doing my own little neuro checking with my eyes and my own little memory exam and stuff. But I know brain injuries, right? I know brain bleeds. Right. And I know that you can be fine right now, and then 2 seconds later, you're out of it.
Yeah, right.
So I had a backpack on as a purse, and that's truly what saved me from getting any brain injury. But I carry my living will, I carry my healthcare power of attorney, and I carry my do not resuscitate. And I carry who's my doctor, because I travel. I'm a speaker, so I travel. And so I carry all of this with me, and thank God I do, because I needed it. So when the paramedics were called, I was in court. I'm like, here's my stuff, because I don't know if I'm going to lose consciousness, but here's everything you need to know. Right. And so nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks they're going to get hit by a school bus as a pedestrian. No one wakes up thinking they're going to get T-boned by a semi. Right. So you have to be prepared in every single way, and then you have peace of mind. You know. I think that's where there's a lot of value is if something should happen to me, I've got everything in order so that my family can literally pick up where I left off and manage the rest of my life, or close down my businesses, or whatever it is they need to know, because they have everything they need to know.
Well, I wish everyone did what you do to prepare. It's so unusual.
Because they would have better outcomes if they did. Yeah. And that's the whole goal, is be educated and have better outcomes, because those are the two. I mean, that just is common sense. And so hopefully people that are listening to this are like, oh yeah, we need to get our legal documents in order. We need to get everything in place and communicated with our family. So we've got about 8 minutes left. Mm-hmm. Are there other things, or are there other projects that you're working on, or tell us about your book?
So the book is basically Get Your Ducks in a Row, is aimed at baby boomers. And it's basically talking about a lot of what we just talked about what you need to do to get organized, but in a lot more detail. And it's you can read it from cover to cover, but I think most people would use it as a reference book. I mean, part of the problem with lawyers is we often talk in legal terminology and we forget what we didn't know before we went to law school. And so we don't communicate so well. And the idea of the book is so that when you go meet with your lawyer, you'll have you'll basically have the background, you have a place to look for explanations, and hopefully when you come up with a plan, it'll be more what you want, and the whole process will go better. And then the idea of the website, askharry.info, has a lot of the same information on it, but so you don't have to pay through the nose. I mean, the other problem with lawyers is we're expensive to get answers. We try to provide as many answers as possible online. Sometimes we can't be as specific because I don't know what the law is in Missouri, but again, I can provide a framework to answer your question, and then if there's some specific things you need to check out, you can check it out locally. So those are two of the things I'm working on. I was going to say a couple words about two other estate planning topics. So one is Medicaid planning. And I often say it's never too early or too late to do Medicaid planning if you're going to depend on Medicaid to pay for long-term care. The advanced planning, the most important advanced planning is to do everything we've been talking about, just to get your estate in order so that if something does happen to you, your family can act as necessary. But one thing that some people do is shelter assets so they don't have to be spent down on their care or have to be used to pay back the Medicaid program after you die by putting them into an irrevocable trust, which is which you have to think about before you do, because the idea of Medicaid, and I should say Medicaid pays for nursing home care, it pays for some home care, and it pays for some assisted living care, and that's very different from state to state, which is unlike Medicare. Right. So Medicare doesn't pay for any of that except for a short period of time post-hospitalization. So, but to qualify for Medicaid, you have to be poor under their definition of poor, and that's why you have to either spend down your assets or transfer them for the most part. And you can transfer them into a trust, but means that you've protected that asset, so it will go to your children, but it also means you don't have access to it anymore. So it's a trade-off. So that's the main advanced planning thing people do, other than estate planning.
I have to jump in real quick. Yeah. We only now have like 4 minutes left.
Okay.
But the Medicaid planning piece is tricky because I know that tons of people do that because they want to preserve their assets. But when you're in my shoes and trying to help a family who now is qualifying for Medicaid, facilities don't want that. You know, when I'm trying to help them find a care community to move into, they want to show that you have to show that you can pay for a year or 2 or 3 years of private pay, because so many people do asset protection. It's messing up our healthcare system. And so it's very difficult.
Let me just say something about that. And I just wrote a blog about that.
Good.
Don't protect everything. Don't shelter everything. So if you're going to do this, make sure you're leaving some funds outside of the trust to pay for. I mean, first of all, you can't anticipate what you're going to need or what you're going to want in the future. So why bankrupt yourself?
Right.
You need to balance your own needs with those of your kids, who you've probably given enough to already in terms of all the love and care and money you've spent on them. So it's something you can do, but don't overdo it. Right.
Yeah, because you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot and then not have good options for care. Because that's what you spent your whole life planning for, is a good retirement.
That's the rainy day.
For the rainy day, which includes care, unfortunately. Right. So one real quick plug, Harry, we met because you are one of our speaker panels or team speakers on Plan for Life, my other company. We are launching in September an online program for financial planners to learn about all things aging. And Harry is, of course, going to be talking about the legal aspects. I'll be talking about dementia, family caregiver burnout, what is an aging plan, and how to get all of your, developing your trusted network of professionals to refer your clients to if you're a financial planner, so that you can be more of a collaborative approach planner versus just kind of transactional and staying in your own lane. We want to really broaden that so that those clients of those financial planners have a much better collaborative outcome, so that we can all work together in making sure that they have the best value that they can using a multidisciplinary approach. So that website is plan4lifenow.com. And we are in the process of getting that updated because we just got the dates set for this online program with Salem State University in Massachusetts. So that'll be the third week in September that it launches. But more information will be coming about that, and we appreciate you being a speaker for that as well.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we are too. We're really excited. So we've got 2 minutes left. Harry, how can people reach you?
So they can reach the law firm, which is Margolis and Bloom, LLP, at margolis.com, margolis.com. And my email is hsm@margolis.com. And we have a lot of information there. A lot of that's more Massachusetts oriented. Mm-hmm. And then, as I said before, the AskHarry.info site is for the whole country. So it's not focused on Massachusetts. And we try to provide as much information there as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, you are amazing. You do great work. You make everybody's lives easier because they can leave your office or leave your Zoom call knowing that their stuff is in order. So
yeah, doing the best we can.
That's right. So I really appreciate your time today and all of your information. And anybody that's in your area, I hope they reach out to you. I hope they look at your website. I hope that they purchase your book. These are really, really important things to have in order because there's a lot of financial and relationship consequences if you don't have your legal affairs in order. So
that's definitely true.
Again, I'm Annalee Kruger with Care Rights Incorporated and Plan for Life Now. I'm nationwide with helping families across the country develop an aging plan. Most of the time it's the adult daughter who comes to me. She's burned out and she doesn't know what's the best for her parents. And so they work with me to put that plan together. The Care Right podcast is the first and the third Tuesday at 3:00 Eastern. So go ahead and put that on your calendar. We always have great guest speakers. We're also going to have Paul Malley, who's one of our speakers for the Salem State University program. He's the president of the 5 Wishes, so he's going to be on in September.
Oh, that's great. That's the workbook we actually use for our clients for healthcare planning.
Excellent. Yeah, that's called the 5 Wishes. So
I didn't know that he was the one who did it, but we use the workbook.
Yep, that's excellent. So thank you again, Harry. You have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll be in touch soon, okay?
Okay. Thank you very much, Annalee.
Thank you.